The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched far beyond what human eyes could easily see. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose in perfect circles around the central speaking platform. Jake Morrison stood at that platform, now his hands steady, despite the weight of what he was about to say. The human delegation had traveled for 6 months to reach this place, and everything depended on the next few minutes. Behind Morrison stood Admiral Lisa Hayes, her gray uniform, crisp, and her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had commanded Earth's space forces for 20 years, and her calm expression gave no hint of nervousness. Commander Alex Turner flanked her other side, his young face serious as he watched the alien faces around them. Some had tentacles instead of arms, others had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Still others looked like living crystals that caught and bent the light. High Chancellor, Dexter of the Zelian Empire, rose from his seat. His body was made of what looked like blue crystal, and when he moved, soft chimes filled the air. His voice carried clearly through the hall when he spoke, though it sounded like wind through broken glass. "Human delegation," Vexstar said, and already there was amusement in his tone. "You have requested to join our defense alliance? Tell us what your species can offer in our fight against the enemies that threaten all civilized worlds." Morrison stepped forward. He had practiced this speech 100 times during the long journey here. "Honored council members, humanity offers our ships, our soldiers, and our commitment to defend innocent lives across the galaxy. We have seen what the Void Swarm does to worlds that cannot protect themselves. We want to help." A sound rippled through the great hall. It took Morrison a moment to realize it was laughter. Thousands of alien beings were laughing at him. The sound was strange because each species laughed differently. The bird-like Altarians made sharp clicking sounds, while the Korath's tentacles writhed in what their kind considered humor. Even the normally silent Quantum Collective seemed to shimmer with amusement. Chancellor Morthok of the Hegemony stood up. He was tall and thin, with skin like polished metal and eyes that glowed soft red. "Young human," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "Your largest warships are barely 2 kilometers long. Our smallest patrol boats are bigger than that. What could you possibly do against enemies that have destroyed entire star systems?" More laughter filled the hall. Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "Size is not everything in war, Chancellor. Sometimes small ships can do things that big ones cannot." This brought even more laughter. Captain Danny Walsh, standing with the other military advisors, clenched his fists. He had fought in 3 different wars and had never been mocked like this. Lieutenant Katie Brooks, who served as Morrison's aide, touched his arm gently and shook her head. "They had to stay calm." "Perhaps," suggested another delegate, "this one from a species that looked like walking trees, we could find some small job for your people. You could carry supplies to our real warships, or maybe mine asteroids for us." The laughter grew louder. Morrison saw Admiral Hayes's face remain perfectly calm, but he noticed her hands clasped behind her back a little tighter. Commander Turner's young face had gone red, but he said nothing. "We appreciate your consideration," Morrison said, his voice cutting through the noise. "But we believe humanity can contribute more than supply runs." "Oh, really?" Dexter's crystal face somehow managed to show a smile. "And what makes you think that, little human?" Admiral Hayes stepped forward then. Her voice was clear and strong when she spoke. "We would like to demonstrate our capabilities. 1 human ship against one of your standard destroyers. A fair test." The laughter stopped for a moment, then came, back twice as loud. Several delegates actually stood up from their seats. The sound echoed off the great hall's walls until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You want to fight one of our destroyers?" Morthok asked, wiping what might have been tears from his glowing eyes. "With one of your tiny ships?" "Yes," Hayes said simply. War leader Kexaval of the Zelian military forces stood up. He was built like Vexstar, but larger, with darker crystal. That looked almost black. "I will provide a ship," he announced. "My destroyer Stormbreaker will be happy to show these humans what real military power looks like." The crowd loved this. Delegates from dozens of different worlds cheered and made whatever sounds their species made when they were excited. Morrison could see beings with tentacles waving them in the air, while others clicked or buzzed or hummed with pleasure. Very well, Morrison said when the noise died down. We accept your challenge. This will be broadcast across all Alliance networks, Vexstar announced. Every world will be able to watch this demonstration. I am sure they will find it very entertaining. More laughter filled the hall. Morrison noticed that even some of the younger alien delegates looked embarrassed by their elders' behavior, but none of them spoke up. The mockery continued for several more minutes before the council finally agreed to the demonstration. As the human delegation left the Great Hall, they walked through corridors filled with alien beings who pointed at them and made whatever sounds their species made for amusement. Lieutenant Brooks stayed close to Morrison's side as they made their way back to their ship. "Sir," she said quietly when they were alone, "are we really going to go through with this?" Morrison looked at her, then at Admiral Hayes and Commander Turner. "Katie, we came here for a reason. Sometimes people need to see the truth before they can believe it." Admiral Hayes nodded. "The demonstration will take place in 3 days above Kepler 4-4 to be. Captain Cole and the Liberty are already in position." Turner frowned. "One ship against a Zelian destroyer? Those things carry enough firepower to level a city." "Yes," Hayes said with a small smile. "They do." Back in the Great Hall, the alien delegates were still talking about the upcoming demonstration. Most seemed to think it would be over in minutes. Some worried it might be too quick to be entertaining. A few of the more thoughtful ones wondered if the humans had some kind of secret weapon, but none of them suspected the truth. None of them understood that the small human delegation they had just mocked represented something the galaxy had never seen before. And none of them realized that in 3 days, everything they thought they knew about humanity would change forever. The laughter would stop then. But for now, it echoed through the Great Hall like thunder, while 3 humans walked quietly back to their ship and prepared to show the galaxy what Earth was really capable of. 3 days later, the space above Kepler 4-4 to be buzzed with activity. Dozens of alien warships hung in the darkness, their crews eager to watch what they expected to be a very short fight. The planet below was a beautiful blue and green world that reminded many of the watching aliens of their own homeworlds. It seemed fitting that humanity's embarrassment would happen in such a peaceful place. Captain Ryan Cole stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the massive shape of the Zelian destroyer Stormbreaker on his main screen. The enemy ship was 4 times longer than his own vessel and bristled with weapons that could punch through most known armor. Its dark crystal hull gleamed with energy that made the space around it shimmer like heat waves. "Sir," said Lieutenant Commander Beth Parker from her position at the tactical station. "They're taking their time, powering up their weapons. I think they want to put on a good show for the cameras." Cole nodded. Around his bridge, 30 crew members went about their duties with calm efficiency. To any outside observer, they looked like typical human military personnel doing typical human military jobs. The ship's instruments showed exactly what they were supposed to show. Fusion reactors provided power, magnetic coils created the ships, artificial gravity. Simple kinetic weapons waited in their launch tubes. Chief Engineer Nick Stevens looked up from his console. "All systems reading normal, Captain. Fusion reactors at standard output, weapons charged and ready." "Thank you, Nick," Cole said. He touched a control on his chair and opened a channel to the observation fleet. "Fleet Admiral Zarthok. This is Captain Cole of the Liberty. We are ready to begin the demonstration." The reply came back immediately. Zarthok's voice carried the amusement that seemed to follow humans everywhere they went in this part of the galaxy. "Very well, Captain Cole. Try to make this last at least a few minutes. Our viewers would appreciate a good show." More laughter came across the communication channels. Cole could hear dozens of different alien voices making whatever sounds there. Species made. When they found something funny, he looked at his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, and saw the man's jaw clench slightly. "All stations report ready, sir," Rodriguez said. The Stormbreaker moved first, its massive bulk turning with surprising grace to face the much smaller human ship. War Leader Kexavel's voice came across the communication channels directed at the Liberty. "Human vessel," Kexavel said. "I will give you 1 chance to withdraw. Power down your weapons and move to a safe distance. This does not have to end with your destruction. Cole smiled slightly. That's very kind of you, War Leader. We'll try to return the favor. This brought more laughter from the observation fleet. Several alien commanders could be heard making jokes about human politeness and how it would not save them from superior firepower. The battle began without ceremony. Stormbreaker's plasma cannons lit up the darkness with bolts of energy that could have melted through most known armor. The barrage was beautiful and terrible, turning space around the Liberty into a light show of destructive power. The human ship's shields absorbed every hit, without even flickering. On the observation vessels, the laughter began to die down. Fleet Admiral Zarthok leaned forward in his command chair, his 4 eyes focused on the tactical display. "How are their shields holding?" he asked his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir? Our sensors showed they should have been destroyed by the first salvo." Aboard the Stormbreaker, War Leader Kexavel stared at his own displays in confusion. His weapons officer, a young Xelian named Dexavar, checked his instruments twice before reporting. "Sir, all shots hit their target. Their shields should be completely gone." "Fire again," Kexaval ordered. "Full power this time." The second barrage was even more intense than the first. Plasma bolts that could have cracked a moon's surface struck the Liberty's shields and simply disappeared. As if the human ship was absorbing the energy like a sponge soaking up water, Captain Cole nodded to Rodriguez. "Sam, show them what we can do." "Yes, sir." The Liberty's response looked almost boring compared to the Stormbreaker's light show. Simple metal projectiles launched from magnetic coils, moving fast, but not impossibly so. To the watching aliens, they looked like exactly what human weapons had always looked like. Basic kinetic rounds that relied on speed and mass to do damage. But these projectiles did something no simple metal should have been able to do. They passed through the Stormbreaker's shields as if they were not there at all. They struck the destroyer's hull with surgical precision, each one hitting exactly where it would do the most damage to critical systems. Within 2 minutes, the massive Xelian warship was crippled. Its weapons fell silent, its engines went dark, and emergency lights began flashing along its crystal hull. "Impossible," whispered High Chancellor Vexstar from his observation cruiser. "Those were just metal slugs, simple kinetic weapons." Dr. Emma Foster, Humanity's scientific advisor, stood beside Ambassador Morrison on their observation ship and allowed herself a small smile. The simple kinetic weapons were actually programmable matter projectiles. They could reconfigure themselves at the molecular level after launch. The Liberty's fusion reactors were actually zero-point energy generators that tapped into the quantum foam itself for power. And the ship's magnetic coils were actually gravitational field manipulators that could bend space-time itself. But the alien sensors saw exactly what they were designed to see. Simple human technology doing impossible things, Captain Cole's. A voice came across the communication channels, calm and professional. "Stormbreaker, this is Liberty. Your weapons and engines are offline, but your life support is intact. Do you yield?" The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of ship engines and the quiet conversations of shocked alien observers. Finally, War Leader Kexavel's voice came back, heavy with disbelief. "Liberty, this is Stormbreaker. We yield." The observation fleet buzzed with activity as alien commanders tried to understand what they had just seen. Sensor officers checked their instruments again and again. Tactical analysts reviewed the battle recordings frame by frame. Scientists demanded to examine the wreckage of the Stormbreaker's weapon systems. But they found nothing that made sense. The human weapons appeared to be exactly what they looked like: simple metal projectiles fired by magnetic acceleration. There was no exotic technology, no energy signatures that suggested advanced science, no explanation for how they had penetrated shields that should have stopped them easily. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the human command, Ship Washington, and watched the confusion spread through the alien fleet. Phase 1 was complete. The galaxy now knew that humanity was more capable than they had assumed, but they still had no idea how much more capable. Fleet Admiral Zarthok finally found his voice. "Captain Cole, how did you penetrate our shields with simple kinetic weapons?" Cole's reply was perfectly honest and completely misleading. "Speed and precision, Admiral. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. This was true. The programmable matter rounds had used speed and precision to reconfigure themselves into exotic matter that could pass through energy shields. But the aliens heard what they expected to hear, that humans had somehow made their primitive weapons work through superior tactics. As the demonstration ended and the fleets began to disperse, alien commanders found themselves with more questions than answers. How had the human ship's shields held against weapons that should have destroyed it? How had simple metal projectiles done what plasma cannons could not? Most importantly, what else were these humans capable of? Back on Earth, President Karen Davis watched the battle recordings in her hidden command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her screen showed the real scope of humanity's preparations. Its massive shipyards hidden behind cloaking fields. Weapons that could reshape matter at the quantum level, and a military force that the galaxy could not even imagine. Phase 2 begins now, she said to the assembled commanders. How long until the Void Swarm arrives? 6 months, Madam President, replied Admiral Carlos Martinez. Maybe less. Davis nodded. 6 months to maintain the deception while preparing for the real war. 6 months to let the galaxy think they understood humanity while the truth remained hidden. 6 months before, they would need to reveal what Earth had really been building in the centuries since they first learned about the swarm. The demonstration was over, but the real test was just beginning. 6 months after the demonstration, space itself seemed to scream. The Void Swarm had arrived, and with them came horror beyond what most civilized species had ever imagined. 17 star systems went dark in the first day, their populations either consumed or twisted into something that was no longer recognizably alive. Admiral Greg Campbell stood on the bridge of the EU's Phoenix, watching the tactical displays that showed the scope of the disaster. His small fleet of 12 human vessels had been assigned to protect supply lines in what the Alliance considered a safe sector. The real fighting was happening elsewhere, where the galaxy's finest military minds threw their best ships against an enemy that seemed to learn and adapt with every passing hour. Sir, reported Lieutenant Commander Janet Lee from her communications station, we're getting distress calls from the Kepler system. The swarm broke through the Alliance defensive line about an hour ago. Campbell nodded grimly. It's a Kepler system. Was supposed to be protected by 3 full battle groups, including some of the Alliance's most advanced dreadnoughts. If the swarm had broken through there, the situation was even worse than their worst projections far away. On the bridge of the Alliance flagship Eternal Vigilance, Fleet Admiral Zarthok watched his carefully planned defensive strategy crumble. The enemy ships were unlike anything in their databases. They looked like living things, all curves and organic surfaces that pulsed with their own light. But they moved with mechanical precision and adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every strategy his forces could deploy. Status report, Zarthok ordered, though he dreaded the answer. Commander Veltar. His aide consulted the stream of reports flowing in from across the battle zone. Battle Groups 7 and 12 have stopped responding to communications. Battle. Group 3 reports 70% casualties. The enemy is advancing on multiple fronts simultaneously. Zarthok's 4 eyes closed briefly. Battle Groups 7 and 12 represented the combined military might of 6 different civilizations. Nearly 100 ships and their crews gone in a matter of hours. What about the humans? He asked. Are they holding their sector? Veltar checked his displays. Yes, sir. Admiral Campbell reports his forces are not only holding position, but actually pushing the enemy back. They've destroyed 17 swarm vessels with no losses. This should have been impossible. Campbell's force was the smallest assigned to any sector, and his ships were no larger than they had been during the demonstration. Yet somehow, they were achieving what the galaxy's most powerful fleets could not. On the Phoenix, Campbell received another report from Captain Cole aboard the Liberty. Admiral, we've eliminated another swarm cluster in Grid 77. Moving to assist the Karathi patrol that's under attack in Grid A2? Understood, Ryan. Try to keep our capabilities as low-key as possible. Copy that, sir, but keeping their capabilities low-key was becoming harder with each engagement. The Liberty and her sister ships moved through space like dancers, anticipating enemy movements before they happened, and striking with weapons that seemed to violate several known laws of physics. Their battles were over so quickly that most observers missed the details. But the results spoke for themselves. Dr. Emma Foster worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the Washington, analyzing captured swarm technology and biological samples. What she had discovered would have sent panic through the Alliance if they had known. The Void Swarm was not just another enemy. They were a galactic extinction event that had been consuming civilizations for over 2 million years. "Ambassador Morrison," she reported over their encrypted channel, "I've confirmed our worst fears. The swarm doesn't just destroy civilizations, they absorb their knowledge, their technology, their very essence. Every species they've consumed has made them stronger and more adaptable." Morrison received the report in his secure command center aboard the Washington. Around him, holographic displays showed the true scope of the battle. While the Alliance saw only what humanity wanted them to see, these screens revealed the real war, a conflict that had been planned for centuries and was now finally beginning. "How many civilizations have they absorbed?" Morrison asked. "At least 47 that I can identify from their biosignatures, possibly more. Some of these technological adaptations are millions of years old." Morrison nodded gravely. This confirmed what their deep space archaeological expeditions had discovered decades ago. The Void Swarm was the great filter that prevented galactic civilizations from reaching true interstellar dominance. They were the reason the galaxy seemed so empty, despite being billions of years old. "It's time for Phase 2, Morrison said. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Hayes aboard the Washington. "Lisa, authorization code Prometheus. Execute Protocol 7. Hayes had been waiting for this order for 6 months. "Understood, Jake. All ships. This is Admiral Hayes. Authorization code Prometheus. Execute Protocol 7. Cross the human fleet." Systems that had been hidden for months began to come online. The Phoenix suddenly registered energy signatures that dwarfed anything the Alliance had ever seen. The Liberty's hull began to shimmer as advanced metamaterials reconfigured themselves into more efficient combat configurations. And deep in space, far from the current battle, massive structures that had been hidden behind sensor scramblers and false readings began to power up. Captain Linda Pierce commanded the UES Defiance, which had been disguised as a supply vessel. For the past 6 months, as Protocol 7 engaged, her ship's true nature was revealed. 15 kilometers of advanced human engineering unfolded from what had appeared to be a modest cargo hauler. Weapons systems that bent space-time itself came online, and her crew of 3,000 took their positions at battle stations that most alien species could not even understand. Admiral Campbell Pierce reported, "Defiance is fully operational and ready for combat." Behind her, hundreds of similar vessels revealed themselves. The human supply fleet transformed into a battle force that made the Alliance's combined military look like a collection of antiques. On the Alliance flagship, Senza operator Quindor stared at his displays in disbelief. "Duh. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the human fleet. Their power output just increased by a factor of 10,000. "That's impossible," Veltar said. "Check your instruments." "I've checked them 3 times, sir. The readings are accurate." Fleet Admiral Zarthok moved to look at the displays himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. The small human fleet that had been assigned to protect supply lines was revealing itself to be more powerful than his entire command. "Get me Admiral Campbell," he ordered. Campbell's image appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the Phoenix's bridge had changed. What had looked like a simple human military vessel now clearly showed technology that was decades ahead of anything the Alliance possessed. Admiral Campbell Zarthok said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What is happening to your ships?" Campbell smiled grimly. "We're showing you what human military vessels actually look like, Admiral. The ships you saw before were just the demonstration models." The implications hit Zarthok like a physical blow. "You mean your entire fleet was disguised?" "Not just disguised," Campbell corrected. "Completely rebuilt from the ground up to hide our real capabilities. We've been preparing for this war for 300 years. On the battlefield, the tide turned dramatically. Human vessels that had seemed moderately capable revealed themselves as technological marvels that operated on principles the Alliance had never imagined. The Void Swarm, which had been systematically destroying everything in its path, suddenly found itself facing opponents that could adapt faster than they could. Commander Helen Garcia led a squadron of ships that had been pretending to be simple patrol boats. As Protocol 7 engaged, they revealed fighter bays that launched autonomous combat units, controlled by artificial intelligences that could process battlefield information faster than any biological mind. Alliance Command, Garcia transmitted on open channels, you might want to pull your forces back to a safe distance. We're about to show you what a real human battle looks like. The next few hours would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. But for now, as massive human warships decloaked throughout the solar system and weapons that rewrote the laws of physics came online, only one thing was certain: the real war had finally begun, and Earth was ready. The space around Sol erupted with light as humanity's true fleet came online. What the galaxy had assumed was an empty solar system beyond Earth and Mars suddenly revealed itself to be the most heavily fortified and industrialized region of space in known history. Massive shipyards that had been hidden behind advanced cloaking technology for decades began launching vessels that dwarfed anything the Alliance had ever imagined. Captain Linda Pierce stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance. As her ship completed its transformation, 15 kilometers of advanced human engineering now hung in space where a simple supply vessel had been moments before. The hull gleamed with metamaterials that could reconfigure themselves at the molecular level, and weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously powered up along the ship's length. All systems online, Captain, reported her tactical officer, Commander Steve Brooks. We're reading full power from the quantum cascade reactors. All weapon systems are operational. Pierce nodded and opened a channel to the fleet. All vessels, this is Defiance. Form up for advance to battle zone. Show them what Earth really built. Behind her, hundreds of similar vessels moved into formation. Ships that had been hiding as asteroids, disguised as space stations, or simply invisible behind advanced stealth technology, revealed their true nature. The human fleet that emerged from the Sol system was not just large, it was impossible by every standard the galaxy understood. On the Alliance flagship Eternal Vigilance, Fleet Admiral Zarthok watched his sensor displays with something approaching terror. The readings showed energy signatures that should not have been possible with any known technology. Ships that moved without visible propulsion. Weapons that fired projectiles that existed in several dimensions at once, and defensive. Systems that seemed to convert incoming attacks into additional power. How many ships do they have? Zarthok asked his sensor operator. Quinder checked his instruments for the 5th time in as many minutes. Sir, I'm reading over 3,000 combat vessels. That's just what's decloaking in our immediate sensor range, 3,000. Commander Veltar's voice rose in disbelief. That's larger than the entire Alliance fleet. But the numbers were just the beginning of the revelations. Admiral Roy Bennett, who had served as humanity's retired military advisor to the Alliance for the past year, stepped forward in the Alliance Command Center. As he did, his appearance began to shift. The simple human military uniform dissolved, revealing advanced biotechnology that had been disguising his true nature. Admiral Bennett. High Chancellor Vexstar stared in shock. What are you? I'm exactly what I've always claimed to be, Bennett replied calmly. A human military officer. The difference is that I'm from our actual military, not the demonstration. Force we sent to keep you entertained. The crystal being's form seemed too dim with shock. You mean there are more of you? Chancellor Bennett said with a slight smile. You have no idea what humanity actually is.
Oh.
On the battlefield, the transformation was even more dramatic. Human vessels that had struggled to hold defensive positions suddenly began advancing against swarm forces that had been overwhelming Alliance fleets for hours. The Liberty, which had impressed observers by defeating a single Xelian destroyer, now carved through entire swarm battle groups with weapons that seemed to anticipate the enemy's evolutionary adaptations. Captain Ryan Cole watched his tactical displays as the swarm tried desperately to adapt to human weapons. Interesting, he said to Lieutenant Rodriguez. We're trying to evolve defenses against our quantum disruptors. Should we switch to gravitational weapons, sir? Not yet. Let them adapt to the disruptors first. Want to see how fast they are. Can change. This was the key difference between humanity and every other species the swarm had encountered. Previous civilizations had fought with the best weapons they had, hoping their technology would be enough. Humans had spent 3 centuries studying the swarm's adaptation patterns and had built their entire military doctrine around staying ahead of the enemy's evolution. Commander Helen Garcia led her squadron of fighters against a swarm cluster that had been systematically destroying Karathi patrol ships. What the Alliance had thought were simple human fighter craft revealed themselves as something far more sophisticated. Each fighter was piloted by an artificial intelligence that could process battlefield information and adapt tactics faster than any biological mind. Garcia to Phoenix, she reported. Swarm clusters attempting to adapt to our phase shift weapons, switching to temporal displacement charges. Copy that, Helen. Try not to show off too much. But showing off was becoming unavoidable. Human technology operated on principles that most Alliance species had never even theorized about. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space-time. Weapons that fired backwards through time to hit targets before they were aimed at, and defensive systems that existed partially in other dimensions. War-Commander Kexavel, who had been humiliated by the Liberty months earlier, now found himself fighting alongside human forces against the swarm. His rebuilt destroyer, the Stormbreaker. 2 stayed close to the human vessels as they advanced through what had been an impenetrable enemy defense line. Captain Martinez, he called to the commander of the human destroyer Vengeance. How do you predict their movements so accurately? Captain Carlos Martinez looked at his displays, which showed not just the current battlefield, but probability. Matrices that calculated the swarm's likely evolutionary paths for the next several hours. We don't predict them, Commander. We planned for them 3 centuries ago. This was the truth that the Alliance was only beginning to understand. Humanity had not just prepared for war, they had prepared for this specific war against this specific enemy. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategic decision had been designed around fighting an opponent that could adapt to any threat. Dr. Foster's voice came across the secure channels to the human fleet commanders. All ships, be advised that swarm adaptation rate is accelerating. They're trying to incorporate Alliance technology they've absorbed. Recommend advancing to Phase 3 protocols. Admiral Campbell nodded from the Phoenix's bridge. All vessels, this is Campbell. Advance to Phase 3. Show them what we really came here to do. What happened next would have been impossible for the Alliance to understand even if they had been told about it in advance. The human fleet didn't just attack the swarm, they began to systematically dismantle the enemy's ability to adapt. Weapons that rewrote the quantum signatures of space itself made it impossible for swarm biotechnology to function. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously attacked from directions that had no meaning in normal space-time. Within 4 hours, swarm forces that had been advancing across 17 star systems were not just stopped, but completely destroyed. The bioships that had seemed so terrifyingly alien were reduced to simple organic matter floating dead in space. The technological adaptations that had made them seem invincible were rendered useless by human weapons that operated according to rules the swarm had never encountered. On the Eternal Vigilance, Fleet Admiral Zarthak watched displays that showed human forces systematically clearing swarm vessels from system after system. How is this possible? He asked Admiral Bennett. 300 years of preparation, Bennett replied. We found the remains of the first civilization the swarm destroyed. We studied every battle, every adaptation, every evolutionary step they've made for 2 million years. Then we built a society specifically designed to counter them. The scope of humanity's deception was staggering. It's not just their military capabilities, but their entire civilization had been restructured around this single goal. What the Alliance had seen as Earth's population was barely a tenth of humanity's real numbers. The rest lived in hidden colonies, massive space habitats, underground cities that had been invisible to alien sensors. President Karen Davis appeared as a hologram in the Alliance Command Center, finally revealing herself as the actual leader. Of humanity, rather than the puppet government the aliens had been shown. Admiral Zarthok, I apologize for the deception, but it was necessary. The swarm has consumed every civilization that knew they were coming. Surprise was our only advantage. Your entire species, Vexstar said weakly. You've been preparing. For centuries. Not preparing for war, Davis corrected. Preparing for victory. As the last swarm vessels died in the darkness of space, the galaxy began to understand what they had witnessed. Humanity had not just won a battle. They had eliminated a threat that had been consuming civilizations since before most current. Species had evolved. They had done it by becoming something unprecedented. An entire species dedicated to a single purpose. The demonstration 6 months ago had been just that. A demonstration. The real human military was something the galaxy could never have imagined. The war that everyone had expected to last for years was over in a single day. Commander Janet Lee, speaking from the bridge of the UES Salvation as it patrolled the former swarm territories, transmitted a message that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. They laughed at us because they thought we were weak. They didn't. Understand that sometimes the greatest strength is letting your enemies underestimate you until it's too late for them to matter. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent in a way it had never been before. The same chamber where alien delegates had laughed at humanity's offer just months earlier now held an atmosphere of stunned reverence. Stood at the central platform again, but this time no one was amused by his presence. The holographic displays around him showed the complete destruction of the Void Swarm and the true scope of humanity's hidden civilization. The Void Swarm, Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, has been the galaxy's greatest threat for over 2 million years. They have consumed 47 major civilizations that we know of, possibly more. The Ancients, the First Builders, the temporal collective species whose technology was far beyond what the current alliance possesses. All of them fell to the swarm. Dr. Emma Foster stepped forward, her scientific credentials now revealed to include degrees from universities that the alliance had never heard of because they had been hidden deep underground or in massive space habitats. We first discovered evidence of the swarm 4 centuries ago, when our deep space archaeological expeditions found the remains of the Kepler civilization. What we learned changed everything about how humanity developed. The holographic displays shifted to show archaeological sites scattered across dozens of star systems. Ancient battlefields where the technology of long-dead civilizations lay buried under millions of years of cosmic dust. Each site told the same story: advanced species that had thrived for thousands of years, only to be consumed by an enemy that learned from every victory. Every major civilization follows the same pattern, Foster continued. They expand rapidly. Across multiple star systems, develop advanced technology, reach a peak of development, and then encounter the swarm. The war usually lasts between 50 and 200 years. The civilizations always lose. High Chancellor Vexstar, his crystal form dimmed with shock, finally found his voice. You knew about this threat for 4 centuries? Why didn't you warn us? Admiral Lisa Hayes stepped forward to answer. Warning, you would have made you a target. Swarm can sense when civilizations are preparing for them. Every species that knew they were coming was consumed even faster than those that were surprised. The revelation sent murmurs through the assembled delegates. Species that communicated through color changes flickered with rapid patterns of distress. Those with tentacles writhed nervously, while others made whatever sounds their kind made. When faced with existential terror, Morrison gestured to another set of displays. Humanity made a different choice. Instead of expanding rapidly across multiple star systems like every other species, we focused on technological development and military preparation. While you were building colonies and trade networks, we were building the weapons and strategies needed to fight an enemy that adapts to everything. President Karen Davis appeared as a hologram, no longer hiding behind the puppet government the Alliance had been shown. Our entire society has been structured around this single goal for 3 centuries. Every human serves the war effort in some capacity. Our artists create tactical simulations that help our military understand enemy behavior patterns. Our musicians compose algorithmic battle hymns that disrupt swarm communications. Our philosophers develop strategic frameworks for fighting an enemy that evolves. The scope of humanity's deception was breathtaking. Fleet Admiral Carlos Martinez materialized as another hologram, speaking from the Sol system where massive orbital shipyards continued their work. Behind him, construction bays that stretched for hundreds of kilometers showed vessels being built that incorporated technology recovered from every civilization the swarm had ever consumed. "We didn't just prepare for war," Martinez explained. "We studied every previous encounter with the swarm across 2 million years of galactic history. We analyzed their adaptation patterns, their consumption methods, their expansion strategies. Then we built a civilization specifically designed to counter every advantage they possessed." The displays showed the true scope of humanity's hidden empire. Populations in the hundreds of billions living in space habitats that had been invisible. 2 alien sensors. Underground cities that honeycombed entire continents. Manufacturing facilities that had been disguised as natural geological formations. An entire shadow civilization dedicated to preparing for a war that most of the galaxy didn't even know was coming. Chancellor Morthok of the hegemony leaned forward in his seat. "Your entire species has been living a lie for centuries." "Not a lie," Morrison corrected gently. "A necessary deception. The swarm has consumed civilizations that knew they were coming and had time to prepare. They've never encountered opponents who studied their tactics for 300 years before the first battle." War leader Kexavel, who now understood why his destroyer had been defeated so easily months earlier, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "How advanced is your real technology?" Dr. Foster smiled for the first time since the presentations. Began. "We've incorporated innovations from 47 different extinct civilizations. Technology that spans millions of years of development. Combined with our own research into quantum mechanics, dimensional physics, and temporal engineering, our current capabilities are roughly equivalent to what the ancients possessed at their peak before the swarm found them." This sent a wave of shock through the assembly. The ancients were legendary even among the Alliance species, a civilization so advanced that their ruins were still incomprehensible after millions of years. "But we didn't stop there," Admiral Hayes added. "We improved on their designs. We learned from their mistakes. We built weapons and defenses that the ancients never imagined, specifically because we knew what enemy we would face." The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just hidden their true capabilities. They had spent centuries building a technological base that surpassed the greatest civilization in galactic history. They had done it in secret, maintaining the deception. Even when it meant being mocked and dismissed by species, they could have easily conquered. Commander Janet Lee appeared on the displays, speaking from the bridge of the UES Salvation as it patrolled space that had been cleansed of the swarm's presence. The hardest part wasn't building the weapons or the ships. It was living with the knowledge that we might be the galaxy's only hope while pretending to be primitive and weak. "The psychological cost was enormous," added Dr. Foster. "Entire generations lived and died knowing that their children and grandchildren would continue the deception. Families were separated when some members were assigned to the visible human colonies, while others worked in the hidden facilities. We all carried the weight of knowing that if we failed, not just humanity, but every species in the galaxy would be consumed. But they had not failed. The Void Swarm, which had seemed unstoppable just days earlier, was now completely extinct. Their bioships floated dead in space, their adaptive technology rendered useless by weapons that operated on principles they had never encountered. 2 million years of galactic predation had ended in a matter of hours. President Davis addressed the assembled delegates directly. "We understand that this revelation changes everything. You thought you knew humanity, and you discover we've been something entirely different all along. You have every right to feel deceived. However," Ambassador Morrison continued, "the threat that forced us to become what we are is now gone. For the first time in 2 million years, the galaxy is truly safe. Civilizations can develop and expand without fear of being consumed by an enemy that adapts to everything." Fleet Admiral Zarthok, who had commanded the Alliance forces during the brief war, finally spoke. "What happens now? Your technology is so far beyond ours that you could conquer the entire galaxy if you chose to. Admiral Martinez answered from Seoul. We have no interest in conquest. Our entire civilization was built around a single purpose: stopping the swarm. Now that this goal is accomplished, we can finally become what we might have been if we hadn't needed to hide for centuries. We want to share what we've learned, Dr. Foster added. The technology we developed, the scientific discoveries we made, the cultural insights we gained from studying so many extinct civilizations, all of it can benefit the entire galaxy. Morrison stepped forward for his final words. The laughter has stopped, and we're glad it has. Not because it hurt our feelings, but because it means the galaxy is finally ready to hear the truth. We hope that in time you'll understand why the deception was necessary and forgive us for the years we spent pretending to be less than we are. The Great Hall remained silent for long minutes after the human delegation finished their presentation. Finally, High Chancellor Vexstar rose from his seat. His crystal form had regained some of its brightness, and when he spoke, there was no mockery in his voice. Humanity, he said formally. The Galactic Council officially welcomes you not as applicants to our defense alliance, but as our protectors and teachers. We have much to learn from a species that was willing to sacrifice its own growth for the survival of others. The applause that followed was unlike anything the Great Hall had ever heard. Thousands of beings from dozens of different species showed their respect in whatever way their kind expressed gratitude and admiration.